In our last video, we rolled forward our financial model. Now that we have it rolled forward though, we wanna see how close were we to projections. So for that, we're gonna be utilizing this budget versus actuals dashboard. To get started, open up the budget versus actuals file, and I'm just gonna right click. I'm gonna click on move or copy, and I'll click on create a copy, and I'll bring that into our financial model right after the summary financials. Let's go ahead and click OK. All right, and now we have static information, which we'll want to replace with real information. And in order to get real information in here, we'll need to open up our budget file that had actuals through December 2024. All right, so here's that file, and it says December 2024 actuals. And let's just double check to make sure that indeed the actuals only go through December 2024. And it looks like that's the case. These are our projections. Now, because our budget versus actuals only cares about these summary accounts, I'm only gonna bring in the summary tab into our financial model to reference that with our budget versus actuals dashboard. So to get this into our summary financial model, I'm first gonna right click, I'll click on move or copy, and then I'll click on create a copy, and I'm going to create a new workbook out of it. Now that we have this new workbook, as you can imagine, we have references to an external file, which I don't want. So I'm gonna break those references by clicking on data, workbook links, and then break all. And let's just click on break links over here. Perfect. Now I'm just gonna right click this information. Let's rename it and call it budget. And then let's right click once more. And this time we're just gonna move it into our file, and let's put it right after the budget versus actuals tab. Excellent. Now it looks like I do still have an external link. So I'm just gonna break these here. And let me just double check the name manager to see if any named ranges came over. So it looks like we have an extra error check, which I'm going to delete. I'll delete that as such. And it also looks like I have a separate latest month of actuals on this budget tab and a separate start date on the budget tab. That's generally okay. I could always merge it if need be, but I think I could just keep those as separate as their local scope. Okay, so now that I have the information, let's set up our budget versus actuals. Let's just make this a bit bigger. The first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm going to bring in my revenue balance, and that's going to be for the values between the start date and end date. Now you'll notice that I have a local named range called report start date and a local named range called report end date. That's gonna make it really easy for me to reference in my formulas and give greater clarity and transparency into how this formula is set up. So I'm gonna utilize the sum ifs, and that sum ifs is going to pull from the budget tab this revenue line item. I'm gonna select this entire range, and I'm just going to lock the columns over here, and I'm going to set the first condition to be if these dates, which I'll lock entirely, are greater than my report start date over here. I'll add an and then the report start date. And then I am gonna copy just this first part over here and say that my dates need to be quotations less than or equal to, close quotation, and then ampersand, the report end date. Let's click OK. Excellent. Now it looks like this populated. If I just copy and paste this down, you'll notice that it now is pulling from row 12, but in reality, my cost of goods sold is on row 13. So I just need to change this over here to now pull from row 13. And it looks like 48,955. Is that correct for my gross profit? And it looks like it is. So I'm gonna now just repeat those same steps for all of our other accounts to get this hooked up properly. Okay, so I just pulled in my income statement balance. It says now for January, my net income was 146,823. If I check my budget tab, it looks like 146,823 worked. Okay, I'm gonna need to do the same thing now for the cash burn and ending cash. So I'm just gonna copy a value. I'll hit Alt-H-V-F to just paste the formula and not the formatting. So this is pulling from row 33, but on my budget tab, it's actually row 58, and we call it cash flow instead of cash burn. So why don't I just change this to 58, and now I'll write cash flow. All right, let's just copy this now, Alt-H-V-F. Now, the issue that I have two issues. For ending cash, that's gonna be on row 63, so let's just change that. But right now, this is saying that the ending cash should be greater than the start date and less than or equal to the end date. Now this is fine for January, but if I change this to, let's say 2/28/2025, watch what happens. This now is doubling our cash because it's summing the values, but ending cash is a value that we should index. Well, that's okay. I could easily just change that by removing this entire piece over here. And then I'm just going to say that there's one condition, that date needs to equal the reporting end date. So let's go ahead and hit OK. Let's change this back to 1/31/2025. All right, 3811271, does that match? And it looks like it does. So now we're just gonna do one last step and we're gonna update our actuals. Now, because the structure of this budget tab is pretty much identical to our summary financials where we just created this information, I should be able to just copy this formula and change the reference from the budget tab to the summary financials tab. And the way I'll do that is just by selecting this information here. I'll press Control V. Okay, now I have no variances, which is a good sign because that means I set up the formulas correctly to pull from the budgets tab. I'm gonna press Control H, and now I'm going to replace the word budget with the words summary financials. Now I can't just hit OK now because summary financials is a tab name that has a space in it. So in reality, I need to just put this quotation over here as such. And just to be safe, I'm gonna put also this first symbol, the exclamation mark. Let's put the exclamation mark here and let's hit replace all. Okay, now that all the information updated, let's just double check. Was my net income actually 134,701? And it looks like it was. Now, how about my ending cash balance? Was that 3738892? And it looks like it was. Awesome. So now that I have my budget versus actuals set up, I can do a really quick read and see what was wrong. Well, it looks like I had about 19,000 less in revenue than I had projected. And at the same time, I beat my OpEx and I underspent by 33,243. So overall, my net operating income, I beat by 19,288, and my net income, I beat by 12,000. Now, although I did all of that, my ending cash, I still was off by 73,000. So that means that I had issues with my cash collections or cash payments assumptions. And of course, the fact that I had less revenue is something else that I'm gonna wanna dive into, as well as maybe this account over here, advertising and marketing, or the headcount. I now have the information and I can create a whole story on what exactly happened in the month of January. Now, going into the details and finding out which exact account and syncing with the department heads, that's a whole separate process, part of a whole nother course. But now you have the tools and you're equipped to create a beautiful budget versus actuals dashboard tied to your financial model. Nicely done.